Let me give you 7 reasons to trust the Bible. Now, the Bible is the most scrutinized, microscoped, criticized text out of all ancient texts. And yet, time and time again, it proves to be reliable, accurate, and trustworthy, despite the endless attempts to disprove it. The first reason you should trust the Bible is because of the forensic method. Now, this is a method that historians use to determine if a text is factual. It consists of 3 tests. The first is the bibliographical test. Now, this tests the reliability of manuscripts and the time that elapsed of the events in question. In other words, what happened? When did it happen? How much time spanned in between what was said was happened and when it happened? Regarding Jesus, there are at least 5,800 manuscripts dating between 20 and 60 years of his death. 1 Corinthians 15 dates back within 5 years of Jesus' resurrection. Furthermore, the Bible, although it's one book, is made up of 66 different books by 40 different authors spanning over 1,500 years. And yet there is a consistent theme that runs through its entirety. And so, it's got to be at least an egg in the basket. The second test is the internal evidence test. Now, this test concerns itself with whether there are multiple accounts of events in question, and are they free of contradictions? In other words, do these stories jive? Do these stories add up? Do they match? Does it make sense? With respect to the New Testament, multiple eyewitness accounts exist that all tell the same exact stories. As far as contradictions or variants, most of them consist of misspelling or numerical differences or sentence word orders. The few issues that remain are explained in the footnotes of most recent documents. It's got to be another egg in the basket. The last test, external evidence test. Is there outside evidence that supports the Bible? And there is numerous categories of evidence, which we'll get into in a moment, so we're going to hold on to that egg. In summary, the Bible was written in time by actual people who were actually alive to see, hear, and experience and write. And it's confirmed by both internal and external sources. The second reason you should trust the Bible is because of historical evidence. People, places, tribes, wars, landmarks, events that have actually happened, documented in history books, are also documented in the Bible. And so, that's another egg in the basket. This historical evidence is backed by the next reason you should believe the Bible, archaeological evidence. Archaeologists have dug most in attempts to disprove the Bible and found numerous pieces of archaeological evidence that support the Bible. They found tablets, papyrus, letters, coin insignia, stone carvings, the tomb of Jesus, the tomb of Herod, Caiaphas' ossuary, David's palace, Jericho's destruction. Perhaps the strongest piece of archaeological evidence are the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls were found in 1947, 20 miles east of Jerusalem. The Dead Sea Scrolls are original copies that contain every book of the Old Testament except for the book of Esther. They date back between 250 and 100 BC. The Dead Sea Scrolls are such an amazing discovery in that the scrolls remained in excellent condition, hidden for over 2,000 years. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were compared to the Old Testaments we have today, there were minimal differences because God preserves his word. Did you know that there are 30,000 pieces of archaeological finds? Not one of them contradict the Bible. 30,000. On the contrary, they all confirm and support the Bible. And so, that's an egg in the basket. The fourth reason you should trust the Bible, non-biblical sources. Non-biblical sources, meaning non-Christians, secular, worldly historians and documentarians, in their writings, do not conflict in any way with what the New Testament with what the New Testament portrays. As a matter of fact, it confirms it. In some form or fashion, non-Christian historians document that a man named Jesus in fact lived. He was crucified by Pontius Pilate during Passover and was believed by his disciples to raise from the dead on the third day. We can almost reconstruct the Gospels just from non-Christian historians. So that's an egg in the basket. The fifth reason we should trust the Bible is because of personal testimonies. Now, what we mean by this is people read this book, and it contributes to the transforming of their lives. For the believer, the Bible is the Word of God. It's alive, it's active, and you'll hear the testimony of a believer say, I don't know, man, it's like this book is talking to me. It's like this book knows my life. It's changing me. And so, it's at least an egg in the basket. The sixth reason you should trust the Bible is because of New Testament testimonies. Now, when we refer to New Testament testimonies, it's important to note that these testimonies were early. They were written again between 20 and 60 years of Jesus' death. 1 Corinthians 15 again dates back within 5 years of his death. This is so important because this leaves no room for lies or legend to creep in. When you compare the New Testament Gospels to the life of Muhammad and the Quran, things about Muhammad weren't written until 200 years after his death by people who did not know him. And all the earliest copies were burned. The fact that the New Testament was written very early on is another egg in the basket. The second thing is early testimonies. They were eyewitness testimonies. These New Testament testimonies weren't written by people who heard from someone who saw someone's cousin say something one time, that wrote down something when they were feeding their dog. They were written by the very people who actually saw, heard, and experienced the things we read. These were first-hand eyewitness accounts, and that's an egg in the basket. Well, people lie. Yeah, people do lie. That's why the next reason to trust these New Testament testimonies is because of embarrassing testimonies. Listen, if you wanted to trick people into following you or your Jesus, you wouldn't write down the fact that you yourself doubted, that you lacked faith. You wouldn't write that one of the main men, Peter, denied even knowing Jesus 3 times. You wouldn't write that after his death, all of his followers ran and hid in fear. And you definitely wouldn't write that women were the ones that found the empty tomb. Back in the day, a woman's testimony was counted as nothing. And so if you wanted to create this hoax, this lie, you would say that men found the empty tomb. And so, at least an egg in the basket. And when the question of did they lie is asked, did they just make this stuff up, we have to consider the last thing, these excruciating testimonies. Again, if you wanted people to follow you or your Jesus, you wouldn't write that his earliest followers were persecuted, tortured, and murdered in the most excruciating ways possible. We're talking about being fed to dogs, fed to lions, boiled, burned, beaten, pulled apart limb from limb, crucified upside down, lit on fire as a candle. You wouldn't write that stuff. People don't die for a lie that they know is a lie. The fact that all the apostles were willing to die excruciating deaths, refusing to renounce their faith in Christ, is evidence they had truly witnessed the resurrected Jesus. And so, it's another egg in the basket. The last reason you should trust the Bible is because of fulfilled prophecies. Fulfilled prophecies, which we're going to get to in a minute.